Hello, and welcome to the Vista Irrigation District Water Rate Study presentation. This presentation was conducted at both of the informational sessions that people could come to in person in our boardroom. We've now using that same presentation to make a recording for others to view who could not be at one of those informational sessions. So my name is Shalako Goodrick. I'm a CPA and the Director of Administration. I work for Vista Irrigation District. Why do we need to raise rates? So we'll jump right in. Rates must keep up with the district's cost. We have in the near future several very large capital projects. Currently, we fund our capital projects through just normal PAYGO, but we have several large ones coming up. Currently, the district has no debt. We haven't had debt since the early 2000s when we paid it off. The last time we had new debt issued was in the 1980s. So we've really operated debt free and have been able to maintain that. However, these large capital projects are going to require that we take on debt to pay for them. Water service isn't like other government agencies that are likely funded by tax dollars, such as police and libraries. We are funded by the amount that's charged for your water, and we operate as a not-for-profit. We don't make a profit. There are no, owners to make a profit, so we're not for profit. Also, our rate setting process is dictated by law. You might have heard of a law called Proposition 218, and that law basically dictates how we can raise rates, and that the rates must be based on the cost to provide that water. It cannot exceed the cost to provide water, and each person needs to be charged only their fair share. To determine what the rates should be, best practice is to conduct what we call a water rate study that looks at, our finances, our revenues, our expenses, and considers all of these items in capital and future projects. It provides a lot of information in a water rate study. It's close to 100 pages, and provides people opportunities to understand at a more in-depth level if they would like to. We normally do our water rate studies internally to save the cost, so we don't have to pass it on to the ratepayers of, conducting a water rate study. But because we're going to need to take on debt for these large projects, um, and through we have a municipal financial advisor that's going to help us with the debt when the time comes. It was determined that it was best really to have a third party do the water rate study and help us with that. So we hired a firm named Raftellus. Let's talk a little bit about some of these really big projects. You may have received some items in the mail with articles on it already. You can certainly go to our website and we have articles on these projects. But our first project I talked about is Pechstein. So Pechstein was constructed in 1978. It's our largest tank and holds nearly 50% of our total water storage. Water storage is determined by calculations based on meters and usage and those types of things, and is determined, by law as well. So you have to have sufficient storage. Our current Pechstein reservoir is in really good shape. The tank is, however, it needs a new roof. Because our reservoir is so important to our system, it cannot be taken off for long periods of time. You can't take that reservoir offline for a year or 2 years, 3 years. So in order to fix Pechstein 1, we are planning to build Pechstein 2, obviously it's a much smaller tank than Pechstein 1, but Pechstein 2 would allow a couple things. One, it would allow us to take Pechstein 1 offline and to repair the roof. The other thing it will do is also add additional storage that we need to have. So it would be built at the same site as Pechstein 1. They'd be built next to each other, and Pechstein 2, the cost of building that and then fixing the roof total would be about $67 million in future dollars. And so that's our first very large project. 67 million is definitely not something that we can pay for with cash that we have. That will require debt. Not only that, these large capital projects, last for a very long time. They have lives that are 50 years, 100 years. And so it's not debt. What a debt allows you to do is have these multi-generational assets be funded by multiple generations and not all rest on the current payers. Our second large project is the Vista Flume. The flume was constructed in the mid 1920s and is a primary water supply conduit to the district. It delivers our local Lake Henshaw treated water through the Escondido Vista treatment plant. Henshaw is our local water source. It accounts for about 20% of our water. The other 80% is purchased by the San Diego County Water Authority. The other 80% is purchased. So we also purchase raw water from the Water Authority as well as treated, but the raw water that we purchase from the Water Authority is treated at the Escondido Vista treatment plant. So the flume connects the Escondido treatment plant and our main area over here in Vista. So it's a very important item. If we didn't have the flume, we would no longer have a local water source because we couldn't get the water to us. We also could not buy raw water and treat it at the Escondido Vista treatment plant. So we would be looking at buying our most expensive source of water, which is treated water from the Water Authority. So in 2019, the district began evaluating whether or not to replace the flume or not to replace the flume. And it took many years. An outside consulting firm helped us. And basically, at the end of the day, we concluded that the most cost-effective method is to replace the flume. The total cost, and you can imagine the flume is 100 years old. It's served us very well, but it's at the end of its useful life. It really needs to be replaced. So the total cost of replacing the flume in future dollars is estimated to be $263 million. So obviously a very large project for us that would require debt. So how are we going to do debt? Well, we've looked at multiple, funding sources. We're at the beginning stages of that, but some of it can be funded through cash, a very small portion, as you can imagine. There's also alternate funding sources, federal, state. There's a state revolving fund from California. There's federal funds that you can borrow, known as WIFIA. There's grants, some small grants. They're somewhat hard to get, and loans, and then there's bonds. So our municipal financial advisor, will be helping us work through alternatives. Obviously, we'll be going after first the most inexpensive money, which would be the federal and state money. Most of the time is the least, the lowest interest rates. Will keep the overall cost as low as possible. So we'll be looking at doing a mix of these items to keep the funding as low cost as possible. So let's jump into the water rate study. So the water rate study has a process. First, you start with a rate setting framework. What is important? Obviously one of the things that are important is that we have a reliable system of providing, water, healthy drinking water, healthy water to use. Other items that can be our framework is to keep rates as low as possible. Then we come up with a financial plan working with the Raftellus to, how much does it cost to operate our system? What are our capital costs? Then they design the rate study. How do you divvy up the costs? What does each customer pay? Those types of items. Then they document the study. That's the 100 pages I mentioned before, where documenting all the pieces of the study and how they've determined these items. And then finally, the process that we're in right now is the notice to customers, the 218 notice that mailed out at the end of August. Then you have a public hearing. You collect and count protests, those types of things. And then depending on the outcome from that, the rates are passed or not passed from all of those steps. Currently, if we did, operated our system and did our two large capital projects that we need to do, but did not raise rates. You can see from this graph right here, our fund balances within a short period of time would go negative, and very quickly we would be, in some serious financial trouble. So Three alternatives were presented to the board in the month of May 2025 to look at some alternatives. These alternatives do not include the cost of pass-through of our wholesale water. As you may know, we pass through currently any increases from the Water Authority on the purchased water, we pass through to our customers. It's effective in January each year, but you won't see it until your March 1st bill. That's how we've done it in the past and how we're asking to continue to do it. We don't, because we are don't know what the Water Authority will do. They pass rates every June through their board effective January, and they don't do what we do, where we're required to do a water rate study every 5 years to increase rates, and we set a 5-year time period. They don't fall under the same laws that we do, and so they don't have a 5-year outlook, and we don't really know what those increases are going to be. So once we're told, we pass through and we set a notification. You may have noticed we do a 2-month notification on the notes part of the bill when the time comes around. So this is the portion that you see on this screen is what we need to increase rates, to be able to keep up with normal inflation, and to also be able to prepare and fund the debt. So the three scenarios were presented to them. What the first scenario was, well, what if we don't have debt? What would we have to do? You can see from an 8.25, it's not a good scenario at all, and certainly not one that the board wanted to do. The other idea was, the second line was to debt fund these, as I spoke about, these multi-generational projects. It makes sense that they're funded by multiple generations. The final item 3 was, well, what if we did sort of halfway? What if we, funded some of the debt but not all of it? The items in the line in red, which is the second scenario, is the one that the board selected, which was with the idea of keeping rates as low as possible without putting us in financial jeopardy, but also completing these projects that where they're at end of life and need to be replaced. So the following screens you're going to see all center around the 4% that was selected and does not include the Water Authority pass-through. One of the last slides, I will talk about that and show you what the pass-through will be for them. So by selecting this 4% increase with several debt fundings, you see 2 debt fundings on here, but there would be a third one to cover these projects. You can see in the green graph that with this funding, we now have enough money. These black lines that go across show reserves. You have to have some sort of reserves. You can't have zero cash and fund it as you're going. We have a working capital operating reserve that basically is a timing reserve, and then we have an emergency reserve if some emergency happened and we needed to fix something unexpectedly, or even a natural disaster. So you can see the 4% will put us in a good place to move forward. So let's talk a little bit more about the pass-through. So currently, under our current water rate study, we pass through any increases or decreases that the Water Authority does when they pass their rates. We pass through dollar for dollar, no increase on our side. If they go up $1, we take you guys up $1. It's a pure pass-through. The other thing in the past that we have done is an inflationary adjustment to the service charge. That's in the past covered the increases we've needed just to stay up with inflation. That increase happened every July 1st. Going forward with this rate study, what we're proposing is that we still continue to pass through the Water Authority at 100% increases or decreases. Whatever they do, we pass through. But the 4% that you've seen on those other screens would include inflation. So you wouldn't have a separate inflation increase. It would just be the 4% and then whatever the pass-through is. So that 4% includes inflation as well as prepping for debt and debt service. So, what does this all mean? To me is usually the end story. So we've changed a little bit of our methodology. So for our tiered, as you know, we currently have tiered water system. That's not changing. The allocation of how much water is in each tier is not changing. So if you're a 3/4 meter, you get 6 units of water is tier one per month. Most people are billed bi-monthly, would be then 12 units of water in a 2-month period. And the tier one is lower because it's going to be based on our lowest costs of water. So one, our local sources is our lowest cost of water. After that, our next lowest cost of water is raw water purchased but treated at Weiss and the Escondido treatment plant. So that's what that first one's going to be a mix of. Tier two is going to be more expensive. It's going to be a mix of our purchased raw waters treated at Weiss and Escondido, but also purchased treated water from the Water Authority. And then the third tier, which most people probably don't see activity on, it's a very small tier, very little water flows through that high level, will be based on our most expensive water, which is purchased treated water. So what's the changes going to be? So right here you can see these are the current calculation. Right here is the proposed new rates. And right here is our current rates. So you can see the difference here in percentage change. With the changes in our methodology, tier one is going to go down by 46 cents, down to $5.73. And tier one and tier two would go up with the way we're distributing the water. For the service charge, also known as ready to serve, I know a lot of people aren't, get confused as to what exactly the service charge is. To be honest, the largest cost of our system is getting the water to your door. It's the pipes in the ground. It's the reservoirs. It's those types of things. The water itself is nowhere near as expensive as that infrastructure. The service charge is made to cover customer service and the maintenance of that infrastructure and the capital of that infrastructure for the most part. So that's why the service charge is high, because the cost is really in that infrastructure, and it is a fixed charge, not based on how much water you're using, but based on actually getting the water to your door. So right now you can see over in this area, we've got different meter sizes. Most people have a 3/4 meter, and we can, calculate the cost of customer service, taking care of the meter, capital. This is the proposed new charge in this column, bi-monthly on this slide. And then right here is the current charge. So you can see the differences. Some are going up and some are going down, and that all has to do with our capacity ratio over here. It's all based on the hydraulic capacities of the American Water Works Association. So this one's showing you a bi-monthly. Right here, this slide shows you sort of a summary of the 5 years and what the rates would be. This is a monthly slide. So you can see right here is our current monthly service charge, fire protection, and then here's the commodity rates currently. Here's the proposed, and then each year subsequently what it would be. This does not include the Water Authority pass-through. And the reason we didn't include the water part, remember how I mentioned that they passed their rates in June? The bulk of the work on this water rate study, it's been a year in the making. It's a tremendous amount of work and a lot of number crunching, and the bulk of the work was done in the spring, and we didn't know what it was going to be, so we really couldn't include it. But we finished the water rate study, preparing to go to the board, and then they passed the new rates. It was way too late to include that pass through in all of these numbers. That's why we have to show them separately. But we've included it in the water rate study as Appendix D and E in that document. If you want to look there, you're also going to see it on a slide as we move along. And we added it at the back at the end because, again, it was too late to include it in the water rate study. It would have taken us another month or two to update it and cost more money with our consulting. So what's a typical monthly bill impact? You know, this again doesn't include the pass through. Um, Here's an example. A typical three-force user is 12 units. Where'd we come up with the 12 units of a typical? We just look at an activity for the year, you know, pick a year, you know, 2024. What's the average usage for three-force? It's certainly not a number that you need to stay within. It's just really just the average use of a three-force meter of our customers in our service area is 12. So like I said, it's 12 units. Based on this increase, your bill would go up, for example, $2.41 or 1.7%. And then we just use an example of a low water use. Again, I actually just cut this in half. There's nothing magical about the 6. There's people that use less water than that. You don't need to stay within 6, but there's an example. And then here's some other examples of just maybe a nursery, a government agency that you can see these are large, much larger meters. If you want to know how much your bill is going to change, we've created a calculator, and I'll tell you about that when we get to that slide, because each person's situation is different. So it's, you know, use the calculator so that you know how yours is going to change. Now, here's the slide I was talking about with the pass-through. So right here, this is an example for next year, 2020, calendar 2026. You can see we've got the current rate. This again is what we're, you know, talking about changing for the tier for this water rate study, or these amounts, which would mean our new proposed, you already saw this, would be these amounts. Then this is the amount of the pass-through increase that the Water Authority is sending through to us effective January 1st. So the reason that Tier 1 is less at 28 cents versus the 48 cents in Tier 2 and 3 is, if you remember, Tier 1 has local water, and the Water Authority has nothing to do with that local water. Tier 1 has local water and purchased from the Water Authority raw water. So that's why it's a little bit less. These would be the final rates for 2026. So what are additional resources and a timeline? So this is what I wanted to talk to you about on a calculator and these types of things. There's lots and lots of resources. So on our website, we have the water rate study. We have a calculator. It's an Excel calculator. You can literally put in your information. It'll show you exactly how much your bill will go up. There's drop downs in there. If you don't want to use the calculator, or you need help with the calculator, you can also call customer service. You know that they pick up the phone very quickly. They all have the calculator. They know how to use it. They know how to help you. They can help you. They can look it up for you and tell you what it's going to be. The other items we have on the website, we have the notice of public hearing, which you got mailed. Frequently asked questions. These are really great ones. We really worked hard with our consulting firm to try to anticipate and maybe put some things in simpler language in a frequently asked question. I highly recommend those. There's also a schedule of meetings, some information videos. There's some cartoon type videos that our consulting firm provided that kind of just explains what are water rate studies. It's kind of that overview. It's not specific to these increases, but it's about this process. We also have the newsletter that you would have received back in either May or June. And there's articles in there, detailed articles on the flume and Pechstein if you'd like additional information. There's also links to prior board meetings where there was discussions about this. By the time you see this, you've probably missed the information sessions. We've conducted one, tomorrow's the other one at the time of this recording. So we had these 2 information sessions. It's this exact presentation. The other thing is we really encourage, we've set up a special email called Rate Study at VID Water that is monitored by myself and Brent Reyes. And any questions that come into there, we will answer as quickly as we can. Turnaround time's really pretty quick, you know, give us a day or less. Here's our website address in case you want to go and see all these items. Again, you can also call. You can call, you'll get through to customer service. They've been trained and they know how to help you with a lot of things. And if the question's too detailed for them to be able to help you with, they'll transfer you to myself or to Brent. So there's lots of resources and lots of information, and I am more than happy to explain any of this to anyone. I'm an accountant, so I like this stuff and I find it interesting. I'm more than happy to go into details on any numbers that anyone would be interested in. Finally, here's a timeline. So the notice went out, at the end of August right here. We've had these informational sessions. The objection, which was the process, which was explained in your 218 notice, or you can find on our website, closes on October 15th. The objection board meeting is on November 5th. And then the, really important date for the public hearing on these rates and whether or not they can be passed or not passed is on the 19th. You can come and talk to the board. You can also call in to that meeting. That information will be posted onto our website leading up to that meeting of how you can call in or come and talk to the board. If the rates are passed, the increases to the rates are passed, then the effective date would be January 1st, but you wouldn't see it until your March 1st bill. So that's how our billing system works, and you would see it on the March 1st because most of our customers are billed every 2 months. So we don't include the increase until March 1st to make sure that all the water is truly, after that increase has happened from the Water Authority. And finally, thank you for listening to this presentation. I certainly hope it was helpful, and give us a call if you need any additional information. Thank you.